Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to see you here today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Marche. I am the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. And we're very excited to have you here. I do have a little bit of legal housekeeping that I need to take care of before we get started. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars, such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you this educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we encourage you to ask questions using the chat box. The presenter will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. And if you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. If we can't get to your question during the event, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator. You can go ahead and wave. This is Cade Hammis, and he's the owner of Storybrooke Financial in Coral, Iowa. He's a certified financial planner with degrees in accounting and finance from Iowa State University. He specializes in working with young professionals and is a caregiver himself. He is the father of a busy daughter, I bet, Cade. She's 2 years old and she has cystic fibrosis. Cade, if you can just go ahead and come off of mute and say a few words about why you are interested in this webinar, and also maybe a little bit about why you're in the profession.
Yeah, as you alluded to, my name is Cade Hammis. I started Storybrooke Financial almost 2 years ago, right after my daughter was born. I started my own firm because she has cystic fibrosis as part of that, because it gives us the flexibility to take care of her needs, but also start creating this business of my design. I chose my business and really who I work with are young professionals. They're not the standard that you would normally see financial advisors working with. Typically, my industry, unfortunately, is all about how much money you can manage. And from that standpoint, I just see that as ignoring the young professionals, people that haven't had the time to save up enough money to invest just yet. And so my passion is really around financial planning and helping put the plan into place to make sure that we're taking care of things like retirement and insurance and all of those unfun things that we don't want to talk about, but also that we get to live life now and enjoy the things that you are actually passionate about. My wife is a nurse practitioner herself, so I work with a very large amount of healthcare providers and nurses and doctors. And anyway, so this webinar very much appeals to me, both as from a professional standpoint, but also a personal standpoint. As you alluded to, my daughter has CF, so we care a great deal about these types of things.
Well, thank you so much, Cade. I want to introduce you to today's presenter. This is Annalie Kruger, and she's the founder and president of CareRight Inc., the concierge of senior care planning. CareRight assists families in navigating the complexities associated with the aging process by managing crisis situations, developing a proactive aging plan, facilitating family meetings, and providing needed support to struggling caregivers. For Annalie, providing proactive senior care planning to families is more than just a career, it's her passion. And she spent her entire 27-year career in this industry and has become a nationally recognized expert in the field. She's also the author of The Invisible Patient, which comes out later this year and outlines the emotional, physical, and financial toll experienced by family caregivers. And Annalie, we're so excited to have you here. and kind of give some insight on how you as an aging care expert can relate to those nurses and teachers who are also doing caregiving, not only maybe at home, but also as part of their profession. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And you can go ahead and share yours.
All right. Let's hope this works this time. Okay. Slide. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for taking your time out today to listen to the What to Do About Burnout, a presentation for nurses and teachers. All right. Move us over here. All right. So I'm a social worker, and I've worked in long-term care as a social worker and an executive director for 18 years before I started my company, Care Rights Incorporated, in 2011, because I saw that there's a caregiver burnout crisis across the country. So it's always the burned out caregiver who contacts my company for services and solutions. We are working primarily with seniors or adults with disabilities and their families who have become incredibly burned out and strained emotionally, financially, and physically because of the toll of family caregiving. So we've tried really hard with Care Right to really try to educate the country about caregiver burnout and trying to help families realize that it's important to develop a plan, a healthcare and caregiving plan proactively versus choosing to wait until crisis mode when you're at the 11th hour and trying to figure out what should we do with mom or dad or my husband or my wife. The reality is that the majority of people wait until they are burned out and in a crisis before they make a plan. And hopefully those that are listening to this webinar today, by the time we get done, you'll understand that maybe it makes sense to put a proactive plan in place and make sure that you're taking care of yourself along the way as a caregiver. As teachers and educators, you're naturally inclined in most cases to be a caregiver. Teachers, educators, social workers, we all kind of fit that personality type where we are naturally inclined to take care of others and work with other people. There was a 2021 survey done that stress was the most common reason for leaving public school teaching early, almost twice as common as insufficient pay. So we need to really look at stress and burnout as major problems. High risk loved one or themselves. There were child care responsibilities that caused people to leave their teaching profession. And there were challenges of remote in-person instruction and inadequate support from the school or the district. Nurses and medical professionals. The University of Utah Healthcare Study or Health Study in 2021 found that more than half of doctors, nurses, and emergency responders involved in COVID-19 care could be at risk for one or more mental health problems, including acute traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, problematic alcohol use, and insomnia. They also found that most were working under severe duress. They were exhausted and they were frustrated over not having the pandemic under control. Plus, there were stressors at home, like including keeping their family safe. The caregiver profile. Some of you may be caregivers to aging loved ones, ill spouses, or children with special needs, or combinations of all three of those. You may have your own physical and mental health issues that you're coping with and trying to be a caregiver to someone else. Caregiver statistics included or continued from ARP. Number of unpaid caregivers in the United States is 65.7 million. 31.2% of households report at least one person served as an unpaid caregiver within the last 12 months. Caregivers are still primarily about 66% female. The average age of a caregiver is 48. So when you think about what's going on in the life of a 48-year-old woman, she's got maybe a young family of her own, and she's trying to balance either a sick spouse or an ill spouse or aging parents or all three. 33% take care of 2 or more people, and half of the caregivers are usually employed part-time or full-time. We know that taking care of one elderly person or one aging loved one can take, the average caregiver spends 22.4 hours a week taking care of one aging loved one. Now, when you throw in all these other people that you're providing care with or care for, plus your own family, that's why we talk about caregiver burnout. Merrill Lynch did a caregiver study. They found that 96% of caregivers report caregiving is much more than just hands-on care. 92% of caregivers are providing assistance with financials. 41% said they entered the role of caregiving suddenly and unexpectedly. 1/3 of the caregivers say they need respite, but they don't get it. And 21% dip into their personal savings, and 30% cut back on their own expenses. This is a pretty typical profile of the families who call me because they're burned out. So the question is, are you in survival mode? I can tell you from working with families across the country for almost 30 years that in time as a caregiver, you will find yourself in survival mode if you do not have a family meeting about what is really happening with your loved one and what their needs are and what your needs are. And if you don't have a plan in place, you will burn out. So most of my families find that they are in survival mode. They can't even think beyond this next hour or tomorrow or next week or their own, they're not enjoying their own time off or their own retirement because they're in survival mode as a caregiver. Common issues of a burned out caregiver who are in survival mode: isolation. I can't tell you how many times the clients, when they come to me, they say, I haven't been to Bible study, or I haven't gotten my hair done. I can't get away for 2 hours because I have to be a caregiver. So you end up being isolated. Friends stop asking you out or coming over because you're always too busy, too tired, or your loved one's behavior may become embarrassing, or your loved one is not safe to be alone, whether it's an aging parent with dementia or cancer or a younger spouse who is also sick. Sometimes you may not feel comfortable having friends over, or they just don't come over because it's too awkward and uncomfortable for them and they don't know what to talk about. You're also always exhausted. You lose interest in things that you used to enjoy. Your marriage and relationships start to suffer, and your relationships with your siblings become strained. I can't tell you how many daughters I've had that call me to put an aging plan in place. And I ask them, well, how much money did you spend out of pocket the year before you retained care right to put an aging plan in place? It's a whopping $15,000 out of pocket. And that's just for travel, for airfare. Because when you get that phone call that your loved one is in crisis and at the hospital, airfare is not $69 on Frontier. It's like $1,000 a pop, right? And if you have to stay at a hotel because you don't get along with your parents enough to stay with them, or maybe they're in an assisted living center and there's no other house there's no place for you to stay, and maybe you need to rent a car. So $15,000 out of pocket the year before because of all these trips back and forth. So when we talk about marital strain, almost every single daughter I've worked with said, my husband was so supportive the first couple of times that we had to make this emergency flight. But after having to be gone all the time and the average, medical crisis takes about 2 weeks of vacation, they have no vacation days left. So you can see how this starts to snowball pretty quickly if you don't put a plan in place and think about the what ifs of aging or what ifs of the chronic condition that your loved one might have. Signs of burnout: irritable, resentful and angry, feeling out of control, feeling overwhelmed, feeling guilty about how you feel, changes in mood, behavior, and your personality, changes in weight and sleep. So the other day I was meeting with an 88-year-old husband who's taking care of his wife who has dementia, and she's progressing very, very quickly. And while he loves her very much, he's also very frustrated because she's acting in a way that's not normal for her because of her dementia. And then he feels guilty when he loses patience with her. And then he feels guilty about being angry and resentful and overwhelmed. And then he feels guilty about how he feels. So if you're listening to this webinar or watching it, and this sounds like you, that's why we want to do this for you so that you can learn how to identify signs of burnout and how to prevent it, or how to kind of fix it, if you will. Your friends and family start expressing concern. We're worried about you. You've gained weight, or you're not sleeping, or you always look tired, or you don't come out with us anymore. So when your friends start showing and expressing concern for you, that should be a red flag. Your own physical and emotional health are jeopardized. If you start feeling anxious, overwhelmed, you're not sleeping properly, you're not getting to the gym, or you're not exercising like you normally would or like you usually like to do, these are all signs that you're burning out. You lose or you quit your job because you just can't juggle all of the responsibilities. And you don't take the job promotion because you're already struggling with having enough time and energy and life balance. Signs of burnout: you are paying out of pocket for items that you didn't plan on. You might be paying partially for an aging loved one's needs. Maybe you're paying their cell phone bill or their utility bill or their incontinence supplies. PPE for work, your gloves and masks. Maybe you didn't plan, none of us planned on having to spend all of that extra money on PPE. Additional child or loved one's care expenses, eating out all the time because you don't have time or energy to cook, and you are jeopardizing your own financial future. So if that's you, here are some tools to help and avoid burnout. Set limits and get help. Know what your limits are. Make a list of what you like to do, and make a list of what you don't like to do, and ask for help. Work to find a solution or a provider to meet that need, and or enlist help to find a way to meet that need. So maybe, for example, you don't like taking your loved one to the shower or taking them to the bathroom. Maybe you don't like having to get their meals ready or set up their medications. There are services for pretty much every single thing that you would need as a caregiver. Maybe you don't like to pay bills, or you don't have time to manage all the financial piece. There's other resources that could be brought in that you'd have to pay for. But that's why we talk about make a list of what feels comfortable to you as a family caregiver, and what would be on that list of things that you would like to take off your caregiver plate, so to speak. And then let's put a plan together and align you with those community resources to help you. You also need to educate yourself. Keep in mind, most of my clients have dementia, and in healthcare, we do a really lousy job of really supporting and educating our family caregivers who are taking care of a loved one with dementia or other chronic diseases. So unfortunately, because that's how the healthcare industry has decided to work with patients, we need to educate ourselves. So if you have a family member with certain diagnoses, you need to educate yourself the best that you can. So you need to understand what their loved one's disease and prognosis is. And you also need to understand what community resources are available. Now, here's the catch on that. If you find yourself already in survival mode because you're burned out and you're just kind of getting through your day the best you can, you don't probably have the time and energy to now become a full-time researcher. So that's why there's value in working with professionals that can help you with this. Acceptance and moving forward. Realize that not everyone is wired for teaching or nursing or caregiving, and accept how you feel and move forward. You know, not everybody gets excited about having to bathe someone or taking, writing checks. So it's okay. Just be you, be your authentic self, and we'll find resources for those areas that need to be outsourced. So self-care, it's important to keep yourself healthy, happy, and active. Even small things count. Reading a book, taking a walk, eating a healthy meal for once instead of a drive-through, spending an extra half hour with someone that you love, or just spending time by yourself. Develop a plan. Understand your options. What do we, if your loved one has dementia or some other chronic physical condition, what are your options? What does that disease look like as it progresses? Consider asking a neutral third party to help you develop a plan. Discuss what is working well. This is how you develop a plan. You have to communicate with each other as a family. Many families, because of family dynamics, might not be able to do this very productively or effectively because too much emotional junk gets in the way of having a conversation. So then you need to find a neutral third party person that can help you, who can also help you develop that aging plan or that healthcare family caregiver plan. But first you need to figure out what is working well, discuss what is working less well. Usually what's working less well is I'm getting burned out. My relationship with the loved one that I'm taking care of is now strained. Maybe they're taking time off work. So you're taking time off work as a healthcare provider or a school teacher only so that you can just take the day off to now take care of someone else in your family, right? So talk about what's working less well. What's not working well at all in your life? What are the goals? Is the goal to keep mom or dad or your loved one home with you? Or do we need to implement maybe some community type of care program? What supports are needed right now to make life better for all? Maybe you need to get some home care or some respite care for a few weeks so that you can just kind of come up for air and just breathe, and then regroup and figure out what makes the most sense for you and your family. Developing a plan. So for example, with Care Right, with my company, we work with family caregivers to develop the aging plan where we detail where does it make sense for your loved one to live? Is staying at home feasible, viable, safe, cost effective? Who's going to provide the care when more care is needed? So as dad's dementia progresses and he can't stay home by himself and your mom can't take care of him because she's got arthritis or she has cancer, what is the actual plan so that not if, but when you get that crisis call that says mom fell and she broke her hip and dad's not able to stay at home by himself because of his dementia, what are you going to do? And how is care going to be paid? I'm here to tell you Medicare does not pay for everything that you think it does. So we need to put a financial plan in place, and that's where your financial advisor comes in. And we also talk about how is the family holding up? How has caregiving affected your relationships? How has caregiving affected you as the caregiver? Sadly, my clients tell me that I'm the first person who's even asked them, the first person in healthcare who's even asked them, how are you holding up as a caregiver? So if you're in healthcare, we need to be more diligent about checking in on the family caregiver. How are you holding up, and what services do we need to put in place so that you have a good quality of life as well? The grab and go binder, there's a picture of it. It outlines 11. There's 11 tabs in it. So all things insurance, all things legal, advanced directives. Who's your list of professionals that you work with? Who is the financial power of attorney? Who's the healthcare power of attorney? Who's your CPA? Who's your attorney? Who's your financial planner? What insurance products do you have in place? Because unfortunately, too many people most families don't talk about this kind of stuff. And unfortunately, it will come back to bite you if you don't talk about it, because at some point there's going to be a medical crisis, a hospitalization, dementia progression, or a death. And you're going to spend more time trying to figure out the business part of what's in place versus actually being able to support the family and take care of yourself. So the grab and go binder is critical. And you can create your own binder as well. Organize all your accounts and passwords, all your insurance that you have, house, car, boat insurance, everything that you have that has insurance needs to go in there. And all your legal documents. If you're a veteran, you know, putting all your VA paperwork in there so that your family has that and so that you have that as well. If you're not a caregiver, many of the strategies that we use to develop an aging and care plan can be used as a template for developing your own plan. In my book that I wrote, there's actually 20, unless my editor changes it, there's 22 pages of scripts, checklists of how to develop your own aging plan or your own caregiver plan. There's scripts and family meeting agendas on how to facilitate your own family meeting. And the grab and go binder, each of those 11 tabs is a family meeting agenda item, so that if you do decide to embark on your own family meeting, you've got an agenda right there with your grab and go binder as well. You absolutely, hopefully one of your takeaways is that you develop a plan for your family. What internal resources can we leverage? Is there someone in the family who does want to take lead on certain things? Sometimes brothers tend to take lead on the financial piece, and daughters tend to take lead, whether voluntarily or not, on the healthcare side, or going to doctor's appointments, or doing the hands-on physical work of caregiving. But really, how does your family communicate? Do you work as a team? What kind of communication system do you have in place? Like, how often do you guys communicate? And do you communicate about what's important? Like, well, dad fell, dad was in the hospital, he's had a medication change. You know, how does your family communicate and how often? So a lot of my clients will create a family Facebook page, so it's private. You can send pictures, you can communicate that way. Some people are really comfortable with a Facebook page. Some people create a Google Calendar or a calendar type system so that you can all say, okay, here's where all the doctor's appointments are, and here's where our loved one needs to be, who's got time, and who can help me get to all of these appointments. Some families also use a Dropbox account for insurance paperwork or other kinds of forms as well. And sometimes family mediation is necessary. Unfortunately, again, because families wait until they're in a crisis to decide that it makes sense to put a plan in place. But now we're doing crisis planning instead of proactive planning. 85% of my families, I do family mediation alongside of putting the family plan and the family meeting together. So it's really a problem out there if you're not communicating as a family. You need to look at having a neutral third party person so that you can actually put a smart plan together. So develop a plan for the financials. What are the financial and insurance resources that you have to work with? Does your loved one have disability insurance? Do they have long-term care insurance? Do they have a life insurance hybrid so that if the time comes that they need care, that there's some sort of financial solution to pay for that? Because again, it's hard for you as a consumer to put a plan together if you're not educated on what your options are. So again, a lot of my clients, when they come to me, they assume that Medicare is going to pay for everything. So during the course of the family meeting, we're like, no, if mom needs live-in home care, that's going to be about $9,000 a month. And they're like, oh, wait, what? So you can't really put a plan in place on your own unless you're the specialist in this particular area. And develop a plan for respite. Really, it's sad, but most of the families I've worked with, this is going to come out really wrong, but just listen to what I have to say, is they don't realize how burned out they are until the person that they're taking care of is in the hospital. And then they're like, oh, finally sleep all night long. You don't realize, because again, you're in survival mode. So then you feel guilty about, being relieved that they're not under your care for now, because you just need to get some rest and be able to take care of yourself. So make sure that you develop a plan for respite. So whether it's scheduling a vacation or just non-caregiver days, maybe Thursdays are going to be your day to do whatever you want to do for yourself and not feel guilty about it either. So respite is critical. And caregiving is doable if you have a plan. So when you have a plan and follow it, caregiver burnout can be addressed and avoided. Questions and answers.
Looks
Kate,
like our
if you want to
first,
go, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
yeah, Annalie, it looks like our first question is, how do I approach my spouse and extended family to ask them to pitch in more because I am so burned out?
Yeah. Yep. That's a great question and a hard question. Again, if you develop a list of this is what's working well, I don't mind going to do the grocery shopping, or I don't mind taking dad to his appointments or my loved one to the appointments, but here's the list of things that I could really use some help with. Now, it's difficult for families to have this type of calm interaction because again, they're burned out. And so it's hard to stay calm instead of saying, I could really use some help with this. It can sometimes come out more accusatory, like, I've been doing this for a year and no one's helping me out. Well, that's because we need to communicate better from the get-go. So write out a list of what's working well, what's not working well, and what do you want to take off your caregiver plate and say, look, this is what I've come up with. I'm willing to keep doing these 4 things, but these 3 other things that our loved one needs, someone else needs to do it. Or if you can't do it, then we need to figure out how are we going to pay someone else to do these things, whether it's giving a bath or providing transportation.
Does respite have to be a long vacation? And how often should I go on respite?
Well, that's going to depend on you. Some people need more than a long weekend to recharge. So it depends on where you are in your caregiving journey. But we also want to prevent burnout. So if you're someone that needs to have a long weekend every 3 months, or you recharge the best having something to look forward to so that you have a 2-week vacation every year. I mean, that's just a personal preference on how often you should get away and for how long. And again, maybe you don't need to get away. Maybe you just want to do a stay vacation, but you don't want to have to be on call during your time away because it's your recharge time. So when we look at like in facilities, if we're talking about an aging loved one, most facilities, whether it's assisted living or memory care or skilled rehab centers, or I should say skilled nursing centers, you can coordinate time for your loved one to go there for up to 21 days. So that if you do want to go on a extended vacation, you know that your loved one's being taken care of. If you don't want to go the respite in facility option, then there's home care companies, and home care companies work with children and young adults as well. So don't think that home care is just for elderly people, but you can also leverage home care companies to provide respite care too, meaning someone will be with your loved one so that you can just get away and do what you want to. One thing I wanted to bring up though, and it might come up as a question, is a lot of families have already moved maybe their aging loved one in with them and now realize that they're in over their head, or that it's not working out, or now that they resent their parent or their person, maybe it's a sister that they moved in with them, thinking it would make caregiving easier. But now it's the day-to-day habits and noises and behaviors that person has that really get on your nerves. Or maybe they thought that it was going to be a workable solution to have mom and dad move in because they're still young and vibrant and playing tennis and golfing. But now 3 years later and 2 strokes later, mom and dad are in wheelchairs or walkers and they can't make it to the bathroom, and your house is starting to look and smell like a nursing home. And now you're realizing, oh, this isn't working. or you don't have privacy, like you didn't think about privacy issues, and your spouse is saying, look, we want to be able to have, a relationship whenever we want to, but we can't with your parents there. So my point in saying, like, those are the fault, that's often the complaints that my sons and daughters who have already moved their loved one in with them come back with and say, oh, we didn't even think this through. So before you make those types of decisions, you have to think about privacy, who's going to pay for what, and keep a record of that. And what kind of supports do you expect or need that you communicated with your siblings about, so that you're not going to be a year or two into this and have no break, and your siblings just think everything's going great and they're living their best life, going on vacation and having fun, and you're sitting there resenting your whole situation because you don't have a plan in place to avoid burnout. Oh, that is such a good question. My wife is an RN, and I am concerned, that everyone leans on her too much. I'm so glad you brought that up. I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, but I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is what I hear from my clients, that, well, my son or my daughter is a nurse, or they're a doctor in healthcare, so they'll take care of me and they know everything that they need to know. And they don't mind coming over to check on me after work. Well, if you're if you're in healthcare, you know that you pull 10 and 12-hour shifts all the time. And when you go home, you want to just go home and unwind and recharge. So that is a very real predicament that you find yourself in. If you have someone that's in healthcare, they do get leaned on too much. I would have to say too much, because it ends up being an expectation instead of a conversation. You have to have a family meeting and say, look, I love you, but I already work 60 hours a week in healthcare, and I'll help you with these 4 things. But you have to set a boundary. Otherwise, you're going to end up being burned out professionally, and you're going to end up being a burned out family caregiver. And that's not a position that you want to find yourself in. So set expectations, set boundaries, but communicate, and again, prepare the list of stuff you're willing to do and the list of stuff that you need help with, and delegate.
They also wanted to know, what are some of the signs to look for someone that's getting burned out? I can go ahead and get that back on the screen here.
Yep, there's 3 or 4 slides of that. So
let me just go back.
Annalee, what if you have siblings that want to help, but they live out of state?
Yep, I'm in that boat too. So I'm in Florida, and I'm from Iowa, but my brother is in Iowa. My sister is in Wisconsin. And I'm down here, and my parents are with me now as well. And my dad now lives with me, and my mom is in a memory care unit. So this is how we handle it. You cannot over communicate. If there's one takeaway, you absolutely cannot over communicate. So my family and we have a group text always going. So I've got my siblings on it and my dad, because sometimes he doesn't remember things. So we do a group text, and that way I'll say, dad has these doctor's appointments that I'm going to be taking him to. Mom needs this and this and this, or mom has a care conference. Do you guys want to join in via conference call? We have family meetings because there's so much going on with both of my parents' health at the same time. We have family meetings about every 2 months, where we actually sit down and Zoom with each other instead of just the texting back and forth. My brother, we delegated, or we divvied up the list, since my parents are taking about 15 to 20 hours a week of my time for doctor's appointments, care conferences, and all that kind of stuff. My brother takes care of all the finances. My sister, because of what's going on in her life as well, she provides the emotional support as well. So she doesn't have clearly defined roles per se, but the fact that she calls and talks to my dad every day is a huge, huge help. So again, outline what your needs are and who can do what. the out-of-state people, out-of-state family members, you can still do a lot of things. Like instead of me having to go do dad's shopping, I can text that's one thing my sister does. I'll say, Dad needs these 6 things. Can you order them online and have them shipped to the house? So really think about the granular details of everything that you do that takes time or energy or things that you don't like to do. That you can outsource to your siblings. And they're usually, depending on your family dynamics, they're usually happy to help because they feel guilty about not being able to be there to help. So, or with a pandemic, no one could travel anyway. So really think about, and you have to be creative. I could go to Walmart and get those 8 things, but if dad has 6 doctor's appointments this month, that's already about 20 hours of my time spent just on doctor's appointments. So delegate those things that those out-of-state family members can do. The other thing my brother did, because my mom's dementia progressed very, 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 very quickly. When she fell and had a broken arm, that can really progress dementia into that next stage very quickly. And it did. And so my brother and his wife, one of the things that they did was they went through a whole bunch of pictures and created a beautiful scrapbook, a picture book for my mom and one for my dad, and they sent it down here to Florida. So those are different things you can do. They can do all of that stuff remotely.
I have a couple questions here on, having low budget. So what if my parents don't have a lot of money? What are our options?
Yeah, that's especially when you don't have a lot of money, you absolutely have to put a plan in place because you're not going to have the same options that people that do have a lot of resources have. So when money is limited, you have to be extra careful and extra smart about what their plans are, because if they have, $4,000 a month's income, but their care needs are $8,000 a month. If their goal is to age in place at home, we know home care at full care is going to be about $9,000 a month. How is that going to be paid? Because Medicare won't pay for that. So again, that's why we meet with families and we help you develop that aging plan so that you can make smart decisions. Do you need to look at Medicaid? Are there other community programs in your area that you would qualify for, depending on what your situation is and what your goals are? But folks that don't have a lot of resources, they absolutely have to have a plan in place, or you're going to find yourself without having good quality care.
If this was given to us by Pat, who made an awesome play on my company's name, Storybook. He said, if my current storybook budget is small, how do I choose the right specialist, or avoid the wrong specialist, somebody that suggests that they can help with everything or aren't a fiduciary? How do you find that those right people to include?
You have to ask questions. What is your specialty? Just like in healthcare, we don't go to a generalist if we have cardiac issues, right? We seek out the cardiologist. So just like if you are aging and your parents are aging, so if you're in that 40 plus age group, because again, we know that 48-year-old women are most likely the caregivers, and then that sandwich generation. So if you're looking for a financial planner, you need to ask questions. What is your specialty? Do you specialize in aging? What is your understanding of family caregiver needs and family caregiver burnout? I have a company where we train financial planners. We train CFPs on how to become an elder planning specialist. So just like in healthcare, if you have a certain issue with a certain body part, you find a specialist that can properly treat you instead of a generalist. So you have to develop a list of questions. What is your area of expertise? What's your training? What is your experience in these 3 things that I'm going through with my family? And don't be afraid to ask questions, because you're going to end up paying these people a lot of money, whether they're a healthcare professional or a financial professional, a legal professional. So you really want to find out and interview these people well, so that you feel comfortable as you build your team of professionals that you're going to work with. You're going to need a CPA, you're going to need a financial planner, you're going to need an attorney. You're going to need a whole slew of professionals to lean on that can help you have better outcomes and your loved one have better outcomes. So ask lots of questions, and again, find out what their specialty is, their experience, and their training. and do role plays. Here's what my situation is. How do you best help me? How are you going to best help me in this particular situation?
I just want to pop in. We did have a question about the recording of this presentation. We will be emailing that out. We will be emailing you a link to a replay. And also, we will be hosting this on our YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
Kate, do we have any more questions that we need to field there?
We have a few more. Do we have a hard cutoff on time?
No, we can go ahead and answer the question.
Okay. The next question is, how can employers support their employees when the work itself, nursing, teaching, is so prone to burnout?
Oh, I love that question. So if your employer has an EAP program, an employee assistance program, leverage that. So most large companies have an EAP program, an employee assistance program. You can meet with your manager or your HR specialist and find out like what's included in that package. So some of them have like a geriatric specialist in an EAP program, or they have like 6 free like mental health counseling sessions that you can leverage. So if you're an employee, look at your employer and say, what kind of programs are offered to us? A lot of the large companies do have those. Hospitals certainly do, because they do. Healthcare usually does, because they know that they have a high burnout rate. So look for different programs in your area. You can also look at maybe your church, see if they have a caregiver support group. You can look at any kind of association that your loved one is afflicted with. So if it's like Alzheimer's that you're dealing with, look at the Alzheimer's Association, look at the Parkinson's Disease Association, the ALS Foundation, so most diseases have an association, and they have like support groups or resources that you can leverage. You can also contact every county. Maybe it's different now with COVID, but pre-COVID, I'll be so glad when we don't have to say that anymore, but pre-COVID, the counties also may have some programs. So you may want to look at the Aging and Disability Resource Center in your county. So the ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, to see if there's any other programs, whether it's emotional support or financial support. And again, I know I keep saying this, but it's true. Make a list of where's the shortfalls. Is mom short $500 a month? And is that what you're pitching in? What is working well and what's not working well? Are there financial shortfalls each month? And if so, we need to find a resource that can help you with that. Maybe we need to look at rent assistance or air conditioning, utility assistance or meal programs. Maybe your loved one's a veteran and they qualify for VA benefits, but again, because your family doesn't talk about like real life stuff and the what ifs of aging, it never occurred to you to say, hey, is dad a veteran and does he qualify for VA benefits? Because that could be almost that's about $1,800 a month cost savings through that benefit program if your loved one qualifies. So that's why it's smart to work with a professional that this is what we do for a living, is help align families with resources and give you considerations to think about that you didn't think about before.
Okay, I'm in crisis mode now. What should I do right away?
Well, obviously I'm going to say, call me so we can set up your consult. But that is what I'm going to say, is because families are in crisis every single day. And that's why I do these webinars. I take my own time to help educate consumers to say, look, there are resources out here to help you. So if you are in crisis, that's what you do. My contact information, I believe, is right there. So you can call me. If you don't feel comfortable calling me for whatever reason, then you need to find someone maybe within your community. If your doctor's office has any resources that they could refer you to, just depends on what type of crisis that you're talking about. But 92% of my clients come to me in a crisis. No one ever calls me because things are going well. So this is kind of my area of expertise.
Okay. You had mentioned VA benefits. Brian asked, can his mom get VA benefits if his dad was a veteran?
It depends. So you have to fill out you have to fill out the application, and the VA has like patient advocates, and they have VA specialists. And it's free. So you can contact your local VA office and tell them what your situation is, and they may be able to find some resources. Or you may qualify for resources that you didn't realize that you might qualify for. So notify your your local VA office, veteran assistant office. You're welcome.
Yep. And unless any other questions pop up in the next couple minutes, the last one is, when is the right time to put an aging plan in place?
Today. Today. And the reason I say that is because it's true. Because I can tell you the people that had strokes last week, they didn't wake up last Tuesday morning and think, oh, I'm going to have a major stroke today and disrupt my entire life and my family. Um, so life happens, life has its own agenda, and we have to do better as consumers and family members at being prepared for it. So the time is now to say, look, I leverage this webinar. Say, you know what, you guys, to your family, say, I was on this webinar today and it really got me thinking about, we've never had a family meeting or any kind of conversation about the what ifs. What if I'm the caregiver and I take ill? What if I'm the caregiver and I'm out riding my bike and I get hit by a semi? What is our actual family plan, and what do we have in place as a family? Do we have insurance, or how are we going to pay for care? Because we know that the majority of us are going to need care other than from our family, and how are we going to pay for that, or how is that going to get paid? So the time is now to have a family meeting and sort out at least some of this that you might be able to do on your own. But again, putting a plan together might be tricky. If you don't know like what Medicare pays for, and what resources are available to you, like the VA benefits and those kind of things. One other quick personal story why I have such passion also about planning ahead is, well, obviously it makes sense, because if you want to have better outcomes and better family relationships, then it's obvious common sense that you have to put a plan for that. If you want to have better family relationships and better care outcomes. But the other thing is that 4 days after my 40th birthday, and you have to realize probably by now you've gotten it, that I do crisis management all day long for 30 years. So but I had my own crisis. So 4 days after I turned 40 years old, I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, because I lived in Milwaukee at the time. And I had just returned from doing speaking engagements across the country, because I'm a national speaker on aging issues. And lo and behold, I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, crossing the street and was walking with an 82-year-old gentleman who had been telling me he had multiple health issues. And we're walking across the street. He's talking, and all of a sudden he yells, "Watch out." A school bus driver was distracted by the 29 kids on the bus. There was a fight with the kids on the bus. And so she blew through the intersection. Instead of looking through the windshield as she blew through the intersection, she was looking up in that little mirror on the inside of the bus, yelling at the kids to sit down and be quiet. And she did not apply the brakes until she saw my face break the headlight of the school bus. So obviously, May 3rd of 2011 or 2012, I did not wake up that morning thinking, I think I'm going to get run over by a school bus today. Right? Like I said, no one that had a stroke last week, or no one that fell and hit their head on the counter and now has a brain bleed. No one woke up that morning thinking, I'm going to have something devastating happen to me today and my family. So, but I practice what I preach. I carry my living will. I carry my do not resuscitate, because I've spent enough time in ICU units with clients to know what quality of life means to me. And it's not that. So I carry my living will, my healthcare power of attorney, my DNR, my do not resuscitate, and my list of who to call if I'm not cognizant and can't communicate. Here's who you need to call. So the time is now to have a family meeting. Just think about when you listen to the news, people are getting shot, they're getting hit and run. those people that had that affliction today didn't wake up thinking that was going to happen. So you have to be prepared, and it gives you peace of mind to have those types of solutions in place.
Another question came in from Pat. Do you do consults with personal aging plans or individuals if he were to call himself, or is crisis your specialty?
I do both. I've always tried to reach people proactively. That's why I do these podcasts and these webinars. But yeah, so I do crisis, and I do. My hope is always to catch people proactively. So I work with families across the country. I've been virtual since 2012. Part of that is because families just don't live near each other anymore, and the only way to really kind of get everybody on board is to leverage technology. But also in 2012 is when I got run over by the school bus. And I couldn't drive, and I couldn't talk, and I couldn't see anyway. So I had to go virtual. So absolutely, I do consults with families across the country. I have six of them today. So this is something I do every single day.
Hey, I want to thank,
You actually don't need to come up with any kind of questions or concerns, because we kind of tease that out during the consult call. It's just that usually when people are in crisis, they don't have to make the list because they already know it's like top of mind. Like, this is not working, and this is what's not working well. So thank you. So whatever list or preparation you feel like you need to do, that's fine. But for me, you don't have to have anything prepared.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much for being part of this webinar today. Kate, thank you for your insight. Annalie, thank you for your presentation. I do have a little bit to say before we end here. Let me go ahead and get my slide up here. Once again, thank you to our speakers and the organizations that worked with us to bring you this webinar today. Look for an email soon with a replay of this event. You're welcome to share that replay with your friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for you, your life, and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. I'm going to go ahead and double check the chat. I think we're good there. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming. We'll see you at another webinar soon, and we'll see you later. Goodbye, everyone.